I've been into comics since I was a kid, before all this Marvel DC adaptation bullshit hit. Forget film and TV moving images, it's all about the universe.
What's going on, everybody? It's Webster Style, the man, the voice, the fragrance. We're here with another fantastic creator. Today we're here with Snake. Snake, how you doing today, man?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, man. Thank you so much for having me on the show and having a chat with me.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Now, one of the things I love about indie comics is especially you get away from the Marvel, DC, and Image to a degree, even though Image is its own bag. You get to really find more human stories, even when they're set in the fantastic, so to speak. And just looking through, your new book, that's one of the things that really just in a synopsis captivated me. So tell us about the view of the Phoenix trees.
Sure. It sort of started. I have a very large family, and it's quite a crazy story of them arriving in the UK. So it's a story about my grandparents meeting. My grandfather was Chinese, my grandmother was Vietnamese. They meet, they connect, they create a family. They live through the Vietnam War, and then because China and Vietnam had a sort of falling out, everyone who was Chinese got kicked out of Vietnam, and so forth. With the same with Vietnam and China. So the whole family were put on a boat, and there was a mass exodus where people were thrown out the country. They lived on a boat for 6 months. Um, then trying to go to Shanghai, and then I think my grandmother got ill, and they had to sort of they had to stop at Macau. They got chucked in a prison, like not prison camp, but like a camp for refugees. They were there for 2 years, and then they finally kind of moved to the UK. And that's basically what the comic is. It's kind of like an autobiographical story about what really happened, while paralleling the Vietnamese creation story with Loc Lan Kwai and his fairy princess. Those two characters kind of mirroring my grandparents' journey.
Wow, that's amazing. Let me ask you, what sort of reception, as far as has your family had to you putting the story into a comic form?
I don't know if they know that. I mean, my mum kind of knows. My dad kind of knows. My dad's English, but my mum is Vietnamese. But like, she's kind of interested. She's just like helping me as much as she can. But
Mhm.
I'm not really that close with the rest of my family. So this was actually a really interesting project because I got to kind of delve into them and understand my culture and history. But the interesting thing about it is all the events are well in the realist world. That story, not the fantasy story,
Right.
but all those events are real. However, all the characters are based on people but made up, kind of their personalities. It's my me being a writer because I don't know my grandfather. Like,
Right.
he spoke Vietnamese and I speak English. So the only memory I have is of him like playing mahjong and cards and just smiling at me from the dining room while playing and smoking. But and then also there's 4 children that my grandparents have in the story, but that's not true. My mother has like 20 siblings, and that
Oh,
was that was impossible to put into a story. So there
right.
are amalgamations and things of people I know and stuff like that, and just to help the story. Um and it's been fun that way. But I find that very interesting that it's kind of based on reality, but then you have to input a lot of your own creative input into it as well.
Right. Now, with that, I'm assuming you had to do a pretty decent amount of exploration into your own family history. Is there anything unique that you discovered in the research process?
Um, I'd always grown up with that story, and that always interested me, and it just stayed in my mind. And I thought I could bring it to the medium of comics. Thought comics was such an interesting way of telling that story rather than film, which massive budget. It would be ridiculous. Whereas comics, you can contain it in that story.
Right.
And then just I sort of interviewed my mother quite a lot. I did quite a lot of research on uh, what happened in Vietnam with people migrating away. Those people, they're called the boat people. They're
Hmm.
called the Ho boat people, and just all those immigrants sort of got kicked out of Vietnam from China. People who didn't originally come from Vietnam got kicked out. So that was kind of interesting. Um, And I guess some little interesting things about my mom. I'm not that close to my mom. Like, we're fine, but like, so I got to hear interesting stories from her past, a little bit more stories more in depth, things like that. Like, I don't want to ruin the comic, but like in terms of the Vietnam War, like there was a factory next to where they lived. They had quite a few houses and a farm and things like that, and there was a
Hmm.
factory there. And obviously, the Americans would do bombing runs, so they just see, you know, bombs exploding outside their window and things. It'd be very close to the house because the factory was close to theirs. So there is a moment in the comic. I won't spoil it, but there is a moment in the comic, and it was just kind of really visual and captivating. Um, and so yeah, just an example. Yeah.
Okay. I find, well, one of the things as far as here in my household and just in general, everybody's 23 me and finding out, their ethnicity and like finding out things about their family they never knew. But you are, I guess, in many respects, you're writing a comic about it. So that was interesting, like the sort of stories that you got and learned about your family through the evolution of this. So it's very fascinating. So with just the comics in general, what got you into just becoming a comic creator?
That question. Why comics? Yeah.
Right.
No. I've always read comics. Um, I can do a bit. I can do a spoken word piece for you later if you want. Which kind
Sure.
of, I can do that if you want. In fact, we'll do it now because
Yes.
it answers your question really well. So I'm a spoken word artist as well, and one of the rewards in the Kickstarter is if 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 um if someone who wants to buy the book wants to get a reward in terms of I will customize write a poem for them, a 3 minute poem, whatever they want, whatever kind of sort of give me 2 weeks to write it. I will perform it like on Skype or wherever, depending on where people are, whatever. And that's one of the rewards. I just thought it was a good idea to use one of my other skills. But anyway, okay, I'll do it. It's 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Is that okay? Five
That's
minutes.
perfectly fine.
Okay. So I've been into comics since I was a kid, before all this Marvel DC adaptation bullshit hit. Forget film and TV moving images, it's all about the unified synergy of words and pictures. A literary super team up, creating fictions to rapture imaginations. Through school uniform and black tie work, I've always had my head between pages, forged with the intelligent craftsmanship of artist, writer, creatives. These 24-page coloured bits of paper have shared space with me through the ages, but there are 4 landmark reads that bookmark my life in stages. The first comic I'd like to mention is the dystopian political page-turner Trans-Metropolitan, with a futuristic Hunter S. Thompson as its main character. I brought this comic with me, luckily, on hour-plus long-haul journeys to work as a customer service monkey at a call centre company the other side of the city. Cattle-cramped carriages and commuter silences faded into the background, with my imagination spellbound. Because these comics are more than just paper and ink. They're linked to a safe space where my head can think and wait for the darker things on my plate to dissipate. My second selection is the zombie survival saga of The Walking Dead, which swam in my slipstream across 2 different decades as separate reading events. I began reading when my hopes of a film career got dashed, like the blood on the windshield of a car crash, and on the rebound found work at an obscene bar and grill team whose employment stunk like a scorched earth slaughter regime. A neighbouring graveyard gave me garden harmony to sit and read on my tea break, my back sunk against the bark of a maple tree's trunk. Because these comics are more than just paper and ink. They're linked to a safe space where my head can think and wait for the darker things on my plate to dissipate. Next time I picked up The Walking Dead was a million miles from home, in Melbourne, Australia, on a working holiday visa on my own. I was stuck between the termite crawling walls of a hostel, with new strangers coming and going with the consistency of a brothel. Each room had bodies piled high overhead, so I'd find privacy in pages with the curtains drawn to my bunk bed. Some nights I'd escape on the city's tram lines, comic under my arm, to meet strangers on dates and stay out till dawn's morning would wake. Because these comics are more than just paper and ink. They're linked to a safe space where my head can think and wait for the darker things on my plate to dissipate. The next comic book is the anti-superhero commentary called The Boys, which occupied a large portion of my young adult life, like background noise. I bought the first $2.99 issue on my first week of university, when the leaves dressed in an autumn-coloured burgundy. For 7 years each month, this comic kept me company, like the clockwork visits of a separated parent mindful of custody. Through sandpaper breakups on campus halls, and through hangover wake-up calls on shared house kitchen floors. Because these comics are more than just paper and ink. They're linked to a safe space where my head can think and wait for the darker things on my plate to dissipate. My final comic is the fantasy western known as Preacher, whose sunburnt pages encapsulate the perfect story for any reader. I grew up reading this comic on my cousin's acrylic carpet floor, after borrowing it from his extensive comic collection drawer. While him and his collective crew would play games of FIFA World Tour, I'd be left in the corner, ignored, a cast-out orphan, but delving deep into this comic's allure. And as I grew older, my love for this comic endured. Reading it became an annual ritual of the tallest order. My usual plan is a Christmas read, as the snow paints the land, wearing fingerless gloves to warm my hands. Because friends and relationships come and go, but comics have never left me in a park on my own. From a lone ranger like me, prone to isolation necessity, our relationship is a lifelong fixture. I can always curl into a corner with pages between my fingers, to be enveloped in a resplendent world of words and pictures. Because these comics are more than just paper and ink. Their panels and pages are synced to the lifeblood coursing through my veins. So we travel in parallel lanes through the pain and mundane of the day-to-day strains and journey forward through future gale force winds and rain until the end of my life's reign. Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. And I love that because it it really encapsulate like what so many of us and what comics mean to us, and those like particular comics that just like inspire us in the medium. You bring up The Walking Dead, and then I just remember I think I started The Walking Dead maybe right before the TV show came out, because I'm like, okay, what is this? Like I heard of it, because I wasn't really deep into comics at that point in my life. But getting into it, I remember I gotten, I guess, all of the trades up until that point. And that Christmas holiday, I just sat there and just and read and was just so engrossed in that story, and to really prepare me for the show, but also just like I've always been a fan of sort of zombie movies in general,
Yeah.
but like it was just such an amazing experience. And I think that if you're not really into comics, you don't really get sometimes how immersive like a really good comic can be and how that impacts your life, not just your sort of general well-being, but also your creative spark as well.
So going on from that, like I'd always read comics, but then during lockdown, I know a lot of people had bad times and lost a lot of people. I'm not minimizing that with lockdown, but for me, it was pretty good. I had a good situation. I had a job, and I didn't have to do too much, and I just committed myself to writing, to
Right.
reading, and I just started making comics in that time, that additional time that I had during lockdown. And I'm just making small little short comics, and then sort of moved on from that and started making larger ones. And I was just like, I wanted to originally, I've trained in film and TV and theater and stuff, and I wanted to originally be a writer with that. And I was
Mhm.
like, nah, like comics are it. And it's that collaboration. I mean, I think the greatest thing in the world, which I think any creators out there, yourself, you'll understand this, when you write something, you put it forward to an artist, and they give you their picture, give you their interpretation of it back, and it's
Mhm.
better than you even thought than
Right.
your interpretation, and that's the best feeling in the world. It's happened a couple of times to me, and it's just great. Yeah.
Right. So I have a question for you as far as going back to the comic.
Yeah.
For your Kickstarter, is it issue one? Is it sort of a trade telling the whole story? How is the structure of the comic laid out?
Sure. I mean, maybe in the future trade to see how if it gets sort of successful, but it's generally miniseries. It's a 4 issue miniseries, and
Okay.
it's because of the elemental quality of it, the way how sort of it's infused with nature and kind of like each chapter represents a season. and tells the story of the season, because it takes place over such a long period in time. So each chapter kind of focuses on a specific season that's in the background, and it has that vibe and that kind of, yeah. So that's sort of the layout of the story, really. And I mean, we're kind of just raising as much as money. We put quite a small goal there, but obviously we want to raise as much money as possible. We're just kind of seeing what we can do in that time, and if we could get the first issue done. I've already done half of it already. I funded it myself to promote it to publishers and things like that. And obviously, thankfully, Edge Comics got back to me, and they're my publisher now, and they're helping with that. But then, if possible, we'd like to do 1 and 2 and 3, but we'll see. Yeah.
Right. And when is the Kickstarter going live?
Yeah, so it's mid-September till mid-November. And as I said, my publisher has been so good. It's as a creative, you're stuck in a room by yourself, and I'm just so used to being alone and being a one man pushing a boulder up a hill. So it's been so nice to have that support and additional just this is additional support, really. I mean, and also, he brings, as a publisher, Chance, that's the publisher, he brings quite a lot to the table as well. Like he just knew a lot of other artists, professional artists that were working in the big companies, Image, places like that. So he managed to get a couple of about sort of 3 artists to do alternative covers for us. So those will also be available, and you get to see them. Stan Yak, Jimbo Sal Dodo, and Vincenzo Riccardi, if I pronounce those correctly, those names. I'm terrible at pronunciation.
Okay, awesome. Now, with that, tell everybody where they can find you and find more about the views of the Phoenix Tree.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, if you just type into, Google Kickstarter, the view of the Phoenix Tree, it'll come up, the page will come up, and you can sort of notify yourself when it sort of starts. And for me, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. My real name is like Scott Matthew Watson on Facebook, but then also on Insta it's Snake87 SMW. And I also got a Tumblr account as well called Collision Comics, and those are just some examples of my shorter comics as well. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Snake, thank you very much. We're eagerly awaiting the launch of your Kickstarter. And actually, by the time this comes out, it should be live or close to being live. So we're eagerly awaiting that. And I wish you much success, man. Website Style, you know where we are. Comics, gaming, fragrance, style. Stay tuned for more. Peace.